Hi guys, penultimate episode of Season 9 of Mamemeister's High Score Kerfuffle, and before we announce the final game of the season, let's review the game we've just had for the past 2 weeks. That game was Zektor, a colour vector game released by Sega in 1982. It's a multi-directional single-screen shooter, similar to Asteroids, but with a bit more going on. You need to clear the enemies from each stage to release the next wave of enemies. Each few waves reveals the boss, who has 3 rotating rings with a gap on each. Shoot through all 3 and you get an extra life, which is a nice mechanic I think. There is much to like about this game. It plays well, looks good, and the digitised speech is nice. I played this one on stream, and although fun, it's far from easy. The original cab had a spinner, and so emulating the controls with a controller isn't ideal. Colin I think is the only one to have a spinner, and he did pretty well with it. This wasn't a game I'd ever heard of, and never saw a home release, but it is a bit of a hidden gem I'd say. One I'd definitely return to, especially if I get a spinner sorted out. Let's take a look at the scores. Given how late in the season it is, we only had 9 scores submitted. We didn't hear from Graham, who has already won the season, Paul, Retro Arcade Challenge, or Man Cave Arcade either. Steve has made a return. He's in 9th, just behind Big Juffer in 8th. Those 2 were around 60,000. Then our next 3 are all in the 80,000s. That's me, Robert and Bob. Our top 4 contain our 3 battling for second spot. In 4th is My Retro Tech with 98,000. He was narrowly pipped by our selector of this game, Milthy, who's got his best finish of the season in 3rd. In 2nd is a good effort from Blue Yak. But for this one, we've got a runaway winner. Dominating with his knob and taking his 3rd win of the season is Colin. Great effort there, and he's given himself a great chance at the overall 2nd place. Here is the score distribution, and it's a bit of an unusual one. We only have 4 bins. Our stragglers are on the left, a couple of bins back from our next 3, who are close to the next group of 3, before a gap of 2 bins again through to Colin. Colin was a chunk ahead here, and 6 of our 9 players were between 80 and 100,000. Definitely highlights a strong performance from Colin on this one. Next up is the difficulty curve, and with that distribution, we see a big jump to our guys in the middle, who show just a gentle incline before we get to Colin at the top, with the big jump up to him. Even our lower scores here are quite decent efforts, but then getting between 80 and 100,000 seems quite doable. But getting beyond that is a bit tricky, with Colin the only one to manage it. Finally, the progress over the 2 weeks. Milthy was doing well early on, briefly being overtaken by Bob, and then My Retro Tech was topping the table for a few days before Milthy got ahead of him again. Colin streamed this in the 2nd week, and that was when he dropped his winning score, never to be caught again. Despite putting their scores in at different times, we can see 6 of our players all ended up in quite a narrow range. Before we find out our final game of the season, let's take a look at the league table. Despite only having 1 game left, we do have a bit of movement. Milthy's fine 3rd place has seen him jump Juff and Retro Arcade Challenge and is now in contention for 5th place, which Bob and me are fighting for. Bob has got ahead of me on this one, but it's our battle for 2nd place where the real action is. That win for Colin has jumped him up into 2nd. He's now 17 points ahead of Blue Yak and 49 ahead of My Retro Tech, who's close to being out of the running. Let's see who's going to succeed with our next game. So our final game of the season is one beginning with the non-alphabet letter. I've had 7 games sent to me, and only 1 was repeated. 10-Yard Fight was a choice from Steve, but also Colin, who gets his choice trebled after that win. We also have 1943, 1944, and 19XX, all from Capcom. My choice was 18 Wheeler, and 4N Raya from Milthy. So let's set things going and see what we get. Okay, slowing down. Could it be 10-Yard Fight? Okay, it's just ticked over. So it wasn't from Colin, but it is from Steve. So yeah, we've got 10-Yard Fight. I think it's an American football game. I don't know much about it, but I'm going to look it up, make a video, and be back in a sec. So our final game of the season is 10-Yard Fight, released by Irem in 1983. It's an American football game. And that's about all I can say. I've played a few games of this, and it makes no sense to me whatsoever. Arcade games should be pick up and play, but this seems like anything you do, the opponent just gets the ball. I'm sure I'm missing something, but not looking forward to playing this one. The game was a launch title for the NES in the US, and is quite well known on that system. We'll be using the World, Set 1 ROM, and default settings. Given this is our final game of the season, our next one will be a Champion's Choice from Graham. Then we'll be moving on to our next season in the competition. So I hope you all enjoy playing some 10-yard fight. Let's see if I can work it out. I'll then be back in a couple of weeks to wrap up the season. See you then.